Today was supposed to be Sydney's last day in lockdown. Instead, the city marked a very grim milestone. 239 COVID cases, the highest daily number since the start of the pandemic. And with the Premier warning residents to brace for even more cases, the Defence Force is being called in to help. For more, let's bring in Defence Minister Peter Dutton and Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles. Good morning, guys. Thanks for your time today.
Morning, Carl.
Peter, to you first of all. Those troops were first offered on the ground almost a month ago. Why is Sydney still waiting for them to be deployed?
Carl, obviously New South Wales made a judgment at that time that they had enough by way of resource with the New South Wales Police. I'm pleased that they've taken up the offer, and the Prime Minister has been making the offer regularly to the Premier in New South Wales, and the 300 ADF personnel will supplement those that are already working in hotel quarantine. There's a lot of assistance that we've provided in contact tracing as well, so they'll do a great job on the ground, and I hope that it's a message of reassurance that this resource will help us multiply out the capability of the New South Wales Police Force and supplement the work that they do, the great work that they do, and let's hope that we can get Sydney out of this as quickly as possible.
It's a delicate message, isn't it, the difference between reassurance and resistance. Are you expecting them to be there for long? Is it going to be a couple of months? What's the deployment?
Well, we don't know the answer to that question yet, Carl. Obviously, we want the lockdown, the lockdown to finish as quickly as possible and people to get back to their normal lives. At some stage, the limitations on people's liberties has to be lifted, and we have to get back to leading a normal life with our kids and our grandparents, and that's what Australians want. But at the moment, that's not possible, and we want to get through it as quickly as we can.
Expecting any dramas there?
I don't think so, and I think the New South Wales Police, who have the powers, don't forget the ADF personnel don't have the powers that the New South Wales Police do. They're there to provide assistance and to support and to supplement the efforts of the New South Wales Police, and they'll do that. They've done it in Victoria, they've done it elsewhere around the country, and I think given the level of training, the expertise that the ADF personnel bring, it should be a message of reassurance, and people should look at it that way.
OK, I agree with you, but some may see it the other way, Richard. Army patrolling the streets, Army personnel. Is it the right move in your eyes? Because others may find it confronting.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with what Peter said. I think the uniform is reassuring, and for Peter and I, we've both had the privilege of working closely with the Australian Defence Force. It is an incredible resource. The people, the men and women who work within it are highly professional. In Victoria, we saw a couple of thousand members of the ADF come down at the peak of the outbreak last year, and actually I thought it was a reassuring sign, and I was interacting as we were going through what was the ring of steel between Geelong and Melbourne. Often it was a member of the Australian Army who was checking my papers, and it was fine. And I think there is a sense of reassurance that comes with that. It is a fantastic resource. Basically, state governments need to be doing everything they can right now to be suppressing this virus until we get to a point of adequate vaccination. And using this resource, it seems to me, is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree, and it maybe should have happened well before now. Pete, I'm sure you're asking that question of state authorities. Is it a sign too that they've lost control of this?
Carl, look, I think it's a sign that it's a very serious situation, and obviously the numbers again yesterday were worrying, but we've got to put our faith in, the people of the New South Wales Health Department and the New South Wales Police. They've done an exceptional job up until now, as they have around the country, and when you look at what's happening around the world, 30,000 cases a day or thousands of people dying, we just don't want to see that in our country.
Also, the Prime Minister was on our program yesterday saying that lockdowns may not be eliminated with the vaccination, no matter what the rate is, given what's happening overseas with other countries, Israel and I think Singapore. They continue to have lockdowns despite a very high vaccination rate. He goes into National Cabinet today. They're looking to discuss this particular number, the vaccination rate. Are you able to tell us what that is? Is it 80%, Pete, by Christmas?
Well, Carl, I'll leave that to the PM, but the Doherty Institute obviously has done a lot of work with universities and experts around the country, and as we're seeing in the UK at the moment, they talk about it now being, in this phase, the pandemic of the unvaccinated. So it is just another message. If you live in Queensland or in Victoria or elsewhere around the country at the moment, look at what's happening in New South Wales. It could happen here tomorrow. I mean, we're fortunate in Queensland at the moment, but if you think that you've got time to get vaccinated or you don't think it's going to happen, think again. I mean, you've got to get vaccinated, and Any Australian who wants a vaccine will be able to get it by Christmas, and let's hope that everybody that's eligible takes it up, that's on medical advice takes it up, because otherwise, at some point, we are going to open up, and people who are unvaccinated are going to be the ones that are in trouble. And as we're seeing in New South Wales at the moment, everybody who's in hospital is somebody who hasn't been vaccinated.
You better get your skates on. It's at 14% or something now. Richard, for you, to get to 80%, do you think they're going to achieve that?
Well, we need to get to a number which is something like that. I mean, we're not going to be in a position of opening up until we get there. I think it's really important that the government does put a number on it, so I hope that that is something that comes out of the National Cabinet today. But as you say, right now the number is 14%, which is a pathetically low number. I mean, we are coming last in the OECD in terms of the vaccination rollout, and that is because the Prime Minister said this wasn't a race, and fundamentally that is why we are in this situation, and it's not until we get that number much higher that we're going to be in a position to get past this. And really, the government needs to now outline what is the plan to get there and how do we get to the other side of COVID-19.
Qantas is planning to bring in a vaccination passport. We know that France has also introduced that. They've actually legislated that in the last week. That's to go to basic things like the pub, the footy, the movies. Pete, do you support that?
Well, Cal, at the moment, I mean, you've got to, before you can go into a restaurant or into an airport lounge, whatever it might be, you need to scan to go in. I mean, that's the law of Queensland, the law of New South Wales and Victoria elsewhere at the moment. So I'm not opposed to to this discussion and to these ideas, because we are going to have, I think, a situation where some people will refuse to be vaccinated. Well, the economy is not going to stay closed. We're not going to stop people from seeing their family members or kids going to school because we've got a minority of Australians who don't want to be vaccinated or don't want to do the right thing. And I think very strongly that we want to open up as quickly as possible. We're doing now over 1 million vaccines a week, 1 million doses a week, and that continues to compound. But toward the end, we will get a rump of people, I guess, who just refuse to have the vaccine. Well, we're not going to hold the country up because of that. That's my view.
Heading towards a recession, do you think, Pete?
No, I don't think so. I think the underpinning of the Australian economy is pretty strong.
OK, Richard?
Well, I certainly hope not, but the lockdown in Sydney is having a major impact on the economy. I mean, it's obviously our largest city. It's not. I mean, the lockdown is affecting those in Sydney, but it's affecting the whole country's economy. So, I think as across that we get through this. But the point is that until we get that level of vaccination up, until we get past being the land of the lockdown, we can't be certain about what the economic future is going to be either.
Finally, I have some good news, and Richard, you'll love this because it falls squarely on Pete Dutton's rather broad athletic shoulders. The Olympics, the Brisbane Olympics, particularly in 2032. And the great news that our French submarines will finally be ready to sail up the Brisbane River for the opening. Can you believe it?
They've been brought forward. They're not due by 2032.
Won't they be here by 2032,
no,
Pete?
They're not. They're not.
Go on, Pete.
They're going to be here soon. They're going to be here soon, Carl.
He can't commit to it. He cannot
Richard wants to be in that uniform. Right, if Richard wants to be in that uniform sailing up the river, we can facilitate that. No problems at all.
I'm glad China's not attacking now, Pete. We'd be in real trouble without those nuclear subs. Know what I'm saying?
Well, of course, I don't want to go tit for tat, but they should have been ordered when Richard had the uniform on.
We were the ones who did it.
I try to be positive on this show, but Richard always, banging on each week. So if he wants to wear the uniform, we can find
an officer. He's an officer and a gentleman. Good morning, fellas, and we'll see you this time next week.
Look forward to it, Carl.
For more on Sydney's spiralling COVID crisis, let's bring in infectious diseases expert Professor Sanjaya Senanayake, who joins us from Canberra. Sanjaya, good morning to you. After 5 weeks in lockdown, Sydney saw the highest daily cases yet, 239 infections. Let's call a spade a spade. It is out of control. What can we do?
Yes, Sophie, look, those numbers weren't good, even though it also was accompanied by record levels of testing, 111,000 people. But look, the Premier is doing everything she can at the moment. They've brought in new restrictions. But the major issue that keeps being talked about at press conferences is compliance and trying to do the right thing. And because we're not seeing that, we keep hearing that there's transmission in workplaces where there shouldn't have been, and transmissions in households. And look, part of that is because the Delta strain is more infectious, but also people are giving the virus opportunities to transmit. So if we can just clamp down on that, we can get on top of this outbreak.
People in Sydney's hotspots now have to wear masks at all times when outdoors. Surely this should be enforced right across the city.
Look, I think so, Sophie, but having said that, the evidence base for mask wearing outdoors isn't great. A lot of COVID is transmitted indoors, the vast majority of it. So I really don't know about the impact of masks in this setting.
But surely
However,
any barrier is good. Any extra barrier against the virus is good.
No, that's what I was going to say. So we don't have data about Delta and outdoors. And if we are struggling with an outbreak, as we are, anything will help. And of course, a mask is a cheap and safe intervention, Sophie.
Police are preparing for more anti-lockdown protests tomorrow. Last week, pretty much no one was wearing masks. If transmission did happen outdoors in those protests, when will we see that reflected in the case numbers?
So the median incubation period, Sophie, is around 5 days. So in the next couple of days, we should start to see cases arise.
So you reckon we'll see a bigger spike out of those protests?
Oh, look, I really hope we don't, but the potential is there for a super spreading event, sure.
OK, 65% of COVID patients in New South Wales are under 40, including 2 teenagers and 8 patients in their 20s who are in ICU intensive care. Given how many older people have had at least one jab by now, are young people the most at risk?
Oh, look, young people are definitely at risk now because they account for the large proportion of COVID cases. So that is why it's so important for people of all ages, adults of all ages, to get vaccinated.
Hospital numbers have doubled in a week. The Chief Health Officer and Premier are warning us all to expect more deaths. It's pretty grim, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We do not want to see anyone going through the outbreak that Sydney is going through at the moment. So if you listen to the health advice, follow the restrictions and get vaccinated, that will make a difference, Sophie.
Yep, good advice. Sanjay, thank you for your time this morning.